love to introduce our special guest, Rick Bleiweiss. I sort of teased a little bit. Rick, as you can see by his background, which is not fake, that is all real, and he'll describe what he has back there. But he is head of business development at Blackstone Publishing, which does some wonderful books as well as audiobooks. And on top of that, Rick is an award-winning mystery author. So he practices what he preaches in his publishing business. So he's a publishing executive, a mystery author. And before all of that, he was, guess what? A music producer and a rock musician. And he worked at a record company as a senior executive and educator, and worked on so many interesting projects. I mean, God, we could spend hours just talking about how Rick helped launch the careers of Melissa Etheridge, the Backstreet Boys, worked on records with Kiss. I'm especially impressed with that. U2, Whitney Houston, Britney Spears, and even soundtracks to Star Wars films, Saturday Night Fever, Grease, to name a few. And Rick has put links to a couple of his mystery novels in the chat. So I encourage everyone to click on them, order them, tell people about them, post good reviews about them. Not only that, on top of all that, Rick has the coolest hat I've ever seen. So how's that for an introduction, Rick? Welcome.
I love it, Gary. I love the introduction. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, let's just go through your history a little bit, because it's so endlessly fascinating. So you started out as a musician and as a record producer. You're in the music business. So tell us a little bit about that and a couple of quick highlights from that. But then afterwards, how you transitioned over to books.
Okay, I will. Although I must say I've written all my life. I just never wrote books. I wrote newspaper and magazine columns and articles. I wrote and published my own sports newspaper when I was 12 years old. Sold it to my 4 closest neighbors. So I mean, I've just kind of written and kind of where writing and, if you don't mind a little anecdote here, where writing and music came together. I co-wrote a science fiction rock opera back in the late 60s. And
is that before Tommy or?
Well, and the man, Sid Bernstein, the man who brought the Beatles and the Stones to the US, he managed me for that. And John McClure, who was Leonard Bernstein's producer, produced it. And they brought it to Robert Stigwood, who was one of the greatest impresarios of the era, the Jesus Christ Superstar, the Bee Gees, Saturday Night Fever. And Robert was thinking of producing it as both a rock opera and on Broadway. And he went back to Sid and said, you know, I have your sci-fi rock opera and I have one other rock opera, and I really don't have the time or the resources right now to do both. So I'm going to tell you next week which one I'm going to do. Well, needless to say, he chose the other one. Well, the other one was Evita. And I was okay losing out to Evita. So, you know, that's also part of what I tell authors, aspiring authors. You know, you can't be discouraged by rejection. You just have to keep writing, keep going, keep submitting. And, you know, eventually you'll hit the right thing. I started playing guitar when I was 12 years old. I had an electric bass with serial number 2. You know, I was in rock bands. And then I started producing records and becoming an executive in record companies. I produced over 50 records. I have a Grammy nomination. I had a record that Coca-Cola used in their commercials for 5 years. The NFL used one of my records for their intro and outro music for 4 years. I've had a lot of fun with music, and I worked my way up. And yeah, I worked on a lot of soundtracks, and I did have a hand, especially with Melissa Etheridge and the Backstreet Boys. And I was very close with Gene Simmons. And in fact, when I launched my novel, I used Gene's business principles, because he has 5 business principles, and I used all of them as part of my launch of my novel. So it really, I've married what I've learned and done. So I retired from the music industry. I'll make this short. I retired from the music industry in 2002. I moved to Ashland, Oregon from New York City in 2003. And in 2004, my next door neighbor told me she was in a writing group and would I be interested in joining it. And I said, why not? She said, you're going to like the people. I joined it. I started writing short stories. And one of the short stories connected with the group, and it became my novel, Pino and Scorpion and the Barbershop Detectives. At the same time, I was getting really bored not using all the information I had built up as an executive over my life. And I got introduced to Blackstone by a good friend of mine who happens to own the audio rights to Winnie the Pooh and was here selling them, licensing them to Blackstone. And he mentioned me and my wife, who was also in the senior executive music industry, to Craig Black, the owner of Blackstone. We met over lunch. He said, I don't know what I'm going to do with you, but I know we need what you got. And he hired me, and I've been there now for about 16 years. And that's kind of the progression with a lot of stuff left out in the middle.
Wow, there's a lot between that, but that's a pretty good overview of it. And Blackstone, over the years, you obviously can tell this history a lot better than I can, but began in audiobooks and has evolved to become a very successful print publisher in its own right. Do you remember the very first print book that you published?
Yeah, I actually do, because one of the things that I do at Blackstone is I launch new initiatives. So, and then I'll hand them off to people who are expert in them, but I get them started. And the print program was one of the things that I did initiate. And actually the first thing that we signed was the Louis L'Amour catalog, then the Max Brand catalog. Then I signed PC Cast, who is one of the biggest YA authors. And then I signed the James Clavell catalog. So that kind of started off. Then I signed Natasha Boyd and Nicholas Sansbury Smith, both of whom have been quite successful for us. And it just kept going on from there. And that was in 2015. And I still am signing things, but that's how we launched.
And how many people do you currently have acquiring content for Blackstone, roughly?
Well, actually, we have 5 people in our acquisitions team, and they're not editors. They don't. We work differently than other publishers. Our acquiring people do not actually edit the books, so they are there for acquisition, and it gets handed off to editors.
Yeah.
And so we have them, and then I acquire, our CEO, Josh Stanton, acquires, our head of film and TV, Brendan Deneen, acquires, and occasionally our salespeople will bring books in as well. Our feeling is, hey, a good book's a good book. It doesn't matter who found it. Let's just get good books and good authors.
Excellent. And so what categories are you specializing in at the moment? Obviously, publishers shift with the trends of the times, but at the moment, what is your current catalog looking like?
It's expanding tremendously, because when we started, we were basically science fiction and thriller and some general literature, if you will. But we're now doing some romance, we're doing YA, we're starting in a middle grade. It's easier to say what we're not doing. We're not doing cookbooks at this point. We're not doing anything that reeks of pornography, and we're not doing anything that is politically or socially controversial. We're leaving that to other publishers. Other than that, we're pretty much publishing nonfiction, fiction, military fiction, you name it. It's like, if it's a good book, why not?
So no cooking pornography.
No cooking pornography. Exactly.
Obviously, I mean, not to take it for granted, but and you guys seem pretty creative and expansive in what you're looking for. But just so everyone understands the business model, every book that you produce, you assume that you will record it for audio in some fashion, for digital and/or physical, correct?
We do. It's not even we assume, we do, period. Yes.
Exactly. And are you doing some audiobook originals as well?
We do very, very few audio originals. No, we are really, I can't say that we won't and we haven't, but that's not our forte. Our forte is really either doing audiobooks that we license from other publishers, or doing the audiobooks to the print and ebooks that we publish for the most part.
Excellent. And what percentage of titles would you say come through literary agents, and how many, what percentage comes through authors directly?
I would say in reality, about 99% come through agents. In fact, I can't say the only, but close to the only titles that we've picked up directly from authors have actually been from authors that I've been corresponding with in social media, where they say, would you mind looking at my book and giving me your opinion? And a few of them have been so good that I put them together with agents and we did sign them as authors, but they're absolutely the exception, not the rule. I mean, we kind of believe that agents serving a good agent serves a better function than just solely bringing a book to a publisher. So we want that expertise. We want that additional oomph, if you will, that a good agent can bring.
I love to hear that, being one myself.
Well, it's true.
So yeah, and a lot of people don't realize how much agents contribute to the conception of the book and the shaping of the proposal. And a lot of authors that I work with have all of these gold nuggets hidden in their platforms, but they don't even think to mention it in the proposal, like, because it's kind of hidden in plain sight to them. You know, they can't see themselves objectively. So what do you see as the hot topics right now? Or are you thinking, well, now is already too late? You know, what do you think will be hot in 6 months or a year?
I can't answer that. I mean, I would just be purely guessing. I mean, YA has been hot. I know we try to sign a lot of books and short stories that we can turn into movies. So we've got a very active film and TV division. And we're finding like that short stories are gold in Hollywood right now. I mean, they're just craving them. So, you know, and sci-fi is never out of style. Women's fiction, transgender and queer fiction. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be inappropriate in my language, but I know a lot of our authors call themselves queer authors.
That's the genre.
You know, so I just think that there's just a lot going on and a lot possible. And then, of course, you have book clubs like Reese's and Oprah's and things like that, where they're really focusing more on women's fiction, and women writers. So you really, there's a whole gamut of very successful genres and styles these days. And I don't think it's pigeonholed. And you're right, what's going to be, look, we're buying things now that we're going to be putting out in 24. I don't know what's going to be hot in 24. So we're just trying to buy good books.
Good content. And so what things do you see? Well, let's phrase it this way. What are your pet peeves among first-time authors? Like what piece of advice can you give authors who have been unpublished? What mistakes do you see?
Well, one of the mistakes that I see is that they don't really know how to write good query letters. I mean, I know some authors who basically, first-time authors, they write a one-size-fits-all Dear Agent query letter, which 99.999% of the time will get you nowhere. And so, I'm always telling aspiring authors, you need to research what agents are buying and accepting in your genre, and then find out who they are and what they like and what they do, and then tailor a query letter to them so they know you took the time to actually find out who they are and what they're about, and then make your query letter as strong as your book is. I mean, just make a great synopsis, make some comparisons, some comps, and that's one thing that I believe I say to aspiring authors. Another thing is, I alluded to earlier, is don't be blown away by rejection. I mean, Harry Potter was rejected. Barbara Streisand was rejected. I had an incident in my career. It happened to be in music, but I was shown a band by one of the A&R guys called Trigger, and he played me their demo, and it was like a home run. You could tell there was hit after hit. And the owners of the company, it was Mercury Records, the owners of the company were older guys who didn't get rock and roll, and they passed on it. Well, that demo, that band Trigger, changed their name to Foreigner. And that demo feels like the first time and cold as ice. And it took an idiot not to see it. And we had idiots running the company at that time. So you can't get blown away by rejection. It happens to everyone. And if you do publish a book, there are trolls out there. There are people who are not going to like it for valid reasons and people who are not going to like it for invalid reasons. And what I do is I look at the bad reviews, I see if there's anything I can learn from them, and then I never look at them again. And in fact, Catherine Coulter told me that she said,
I know her, yeah.
Yeah, she said to me, I told my agent, my publisher, I don't ever want to see a negative. There's not enough time in life to be mired in negatives. I kind of agree with that. It's like, get up and fight again. You know, and Michael Jordan, I think he had a great quote, and he said, I can accept failure. Everyone fails at something. What I can't accept is not trying.
Right. By the way, when I first met Catherine Coulter, I published her audio years ago. So when I first met her in a hotel lobby, she asked me if I had a joint.
Well, if she asked me that today, I'd give her away.
You know, don't forget that. So,
and I must add one last thing, and that is for writers, have fun. You know, this is not, you know, where people are going to live or die by what you do. Have fun with the process.
You know, it's in, you know, many years ago, if you remember ER television show.
Oh yeah, sure.
George Clooney and Anthony Edwards. I loved watching that show for one reason, because when I was a publishing executive, no matter what would go wrong, I couldn't kill anyone. Nobody would die. So, you know, it made me feel a little better. You know, it's like my life isn't as bad as theirs, no matter what stress we're under.
I don't know if I'm taking too much time, but may I offer?
No, I'll tell you when. No, we're good for now.
One other piece of advice. Could I give one other?
Absolutely. To
an aspiring author, and that is, know what your goals are. There's nothing wrong with self-publishing. There's nothing wrong with being published by a hybrid publisher, a traditional publisher. But based on what your goals are, whether you just want to have a book out with your name on it and that's good enough, or whether you want to become the next Stephen King, is a whole different thing. So it really, how much marketing goes in, what needs to be done, is to some degree going to be shaped by your goals. If you don't know what your goals are, you're more likely to flounder.
Really good point. Excellent. And is there anything that you can think of recently, a tip for marketing, publicity that worked with one of your authors, just like a great idea, something new, different, exceptionally done?
You know, we're constantly trying and do new things all the time. In fact, right now we're engaging with a company that it aggregates book influencers. And so, you know, with Google Analytics changing next year, the whole playing field is going to be different. So we believe that influencers are going to be a huge part going forward, whether they be TikTok, whether they not, you know, wherever they are. So, you know, it's like that one of the things we're doing is we're doing a whole influencer campaign with titles. We're also doing on some books, and my book had it, my Scorpion book, we're trying what we're calling transmedia launches. You know, to some degree, it's not dissimilar what I did with record albums and with soundtracks, where, you know, we're doing not just video trailers, which we're doing for virtually every book, but we're doing author logos. We've actually done video game apps that are in the Apple and Google Play app stores that tie into the books. We have done theme songs for the books and the characters. We're trying to extend brands of authors and books beyond just traditional publishing.
Really smart. Excellent. Well, we could talk for hours and hours, and there's so many questions that I have, and I'm sure people who are watching this have a lot of questions. Feel free to add them to the chat, and Rick, you'll be able to stay with us for a bit?
Absolutely. As long as you want me, I'm here.
That's great. So yeah, just throw your questions up there, and Rick will do his best to answer. And if you haven't checked out his books, they are in the chat, the links to Amazon, go buy them. And are there any hot books from Blackstone that you want to mention?
You know, the problem with that is that it's like your children. Which
you can't
of your
play
children
favorites.
do you love best? I will tell you, we've had a huge success with Norman Reedus's book, Ravaged, recently. It's on the New York Times bestseller list, which was actually our first New York Times bestseller, which is great. So we're moving along in that regard. But I don't want to just single that out, because I mean, it's a great book and it did really well for us. But you know, we
got to celebrate, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Rick, you are just such a great guest, and we're definitely going to have you on at a later date because we have so many more questions for you.
I would hope so. I'd love to.
But stick around, and thank you so much. I think you've imparted so much to this group, and we really appreciate it.